our greatest challenges in soil fertility is lime.
But look, it's a no-brainer to have the pH right, you know. It's probably one of the cheaper things. And it's no huge labour cost on the farmer, because all you're doing is making a phone call and all you have to do is show them the paddock. Everything else is done for you, you know.
This week I'm joined by John Maher of Grass10 and John Leahy, dairy farmer in Athea, County Limerick, to try and reinforce the importance of lime for nitrogen release, grass growth, soil pH and the positive effect that this has on ryegrass and clover persistence. So John, we were talking to Seamus Kearney a couple of weeks ago in relation to soil fertility as a whole, and Seamus would have focused a good bit on the lime, but we're back talking about lime less than a month later probably. And the reason being that there probably, despite Seamus's efforts, there hasn't been a huge movement in terms of lime, and we haven't seen a huge amount of lime being spread locally in our area. You and I are both in the same area, and John Leahy can talk about it in a minute from his perspective as well. But the weather hasn't been maybe all that favourable in the last few weeks, but it has improved a lot in the last week or two again. So the scope is there for people to lime, and there is a certain element of people forgetting about the need to do it. And we're kind of doing this nearly as a reminder, a follow-up on Seamus's podcast a couple of weeks ago, as a reminder to people that there is scope to spread lime over the next couple of weeks again. So just, again, John, just to remind people of, well, one, the target in terms of the total amount of lime we should be spreading, and the need for it then. So the justification, or why should people go spreading lime on the middle of October in 2025?
The first point to make, Stuart, is I accept the weather was quirky back 2 weeks ago, but like the weather has improved enormously, and as a result, the ground conditions are fabulous. So you have this opportunity. We're also, you know, it's the middle of October now, Stuart. We're closing for the last week, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. So ground conditions are very, very good. We're on a closing rotation. We're on, so means the swards are clean. We're on a long rotation. So even if you spread ahead of the animals, you know, the rotation is long enough that they can handle that. You'll get some rain along the way to wash it in. And I suppose the big thing, Stuart, there's money in the bank this year compared to maybe years gone by. And it's money well invested. For every, I suppose, simple numbers, Stuart, for every euro invested in lime, you're going to get 7 in return. I know Seamus touched on this in terms of the tax man and all that, and he's right. So you have opportunity financially, opportunity weather-wise, and you know, opportunity grass-wise to do this. So I suppose that's the you know, the timing of it. And when we look at where we need to be, as I was saying to you before, at the start, Stuart, we need to be applying well over 1 million tonnes applied per year. The last time we applied over 1.5 million tonnes was 1983. The last time we applied over 2 million tonnes was 1982. We've been stuck about 1 million tonnes or thereabout on average for the last number of years. We are way, way short of where we need to be, right, to get soils where we want to be in terms of pH. People don't realise the importance of it. I remember Stan Lawler making a famous statement that our greatest challenges in soil fertility is lime. And he's not wrong in that. That's over 10 years ago and still remains the same challenge today, I suppose. If we were to look at where we need to be by 2030 and environmental target, we're supposed to apply over 2 million tonnes, 2.5 million tonnes of lime to be applied per year. That's where we need to be. So we're only halfway. There are many, many soils in the country that are still deficient in lime. While the recent soil fertility stats have improved, we still have an awful long way to go. And like people don't realise what lime does. I think the best way of describing it is like, you know, you can have, you know, your engine in your car or your tractor, but without the oil, the engine won't work or it'll stop on you. And that's what lime does. It's the oil that, you know, releases nutrient from the soil. Just applying lime on its own, right, to fix the pH will jump in grass production. But what it also does then, it releases P and K from the soil. That is massive and cannot be, overemphasized. To give some simple numbers, if I was to say apply, 2 tons of lime per acre when the pH is well below 6, what we do in terms of grass production, the immediate jump would be 1.5 tons of dry matter per hectare, right? But because you release P and K, then you get the kick from those as well. So the potential here is enormous. To buy a bag of a good compound is going to cost you somewhere about 25, 30 euros for a good compound fertiliser. for the same price, that's 50 kilo bag, for the same price, you will get 1,000 kilos of fertiliser in a ton of lime. So the economics are massively in your favour. I suppose the other thing to say, like David Wall has done some very good work on this, and some of his colleagues. I've done many workshops with him along the way. It's always a great process when we do it, but we probably don't do it often enough. But I remember him putting up a slide like, applying lime and applying massive quantities of P, and like in simple terms, like 2 ton of lime to acre is nearly equivalent of applying well over 50 units of P per acre, which nobody has an allowance for anymore. So lime will release P, and you often go to groups or events, and farmers will say to you, we need more of a P allowance. I remember the first time that this really struck me a number of years ago about the P allowance, and asking the farmer, where were we with soil samples? All right. Dug him out. To be fair to the man now, he dug him out. He was measuring grass, doing a good job, but like 2 of the soil samples, only 2 were above 6 in pH, and then it was asking for more P allowance. Like the applying lime will release that P from the soil. If I was to be conservative about it and use David Wall's old work, it'll allow you to jump an index just by fixing the lime from well below 6 to bring it well above 6. We need to be at 6.5 for grassland, I suppose, even a little bit higher with clover. The other thing that people don't realise is that, like, if you apply a bag of 18-6-12 in the month of April and our pH is low, right, we're going to lose some of the nitrogen, probably 3 or 4 units. Just one bag now of 18-6-12 to the acre. Going to lose 3 or 4 units of the nitrogen straight to the sky, never to return, because the pH is wrong. Half to 6 of the P will be locked up within weeks, not months, weeks, locked up because the pH is wrong, well below 6. And probably 3 of the 12 of the K will be locked up within weeks, not months, right? So the consequences here are enormous. That's ever before we mention anything about ryegrass performing or survival, and certainly clover survival. Low pH soils, clover just will not survive. So they're the things that make a difference, Stuart. We know from the dairy side of the story, I think it was about 40% of soil samples last year were deficient in lime. So, we now have good weather, long rotation, ground they're able to travel, money in the bank from a fairly good year. It's a great opportunity to get the lime out. Great opportunity.
So, John, just to clarify there, so in terms of the P, and as you said, it's a question that we get asked the whole time in relation to that P allowance. Like, you could have a high P status according to the soil test, but with lime out of kilter, that P is not available.
The availability of P is largely influenced by pH. Largely. There's a soil type piece in it as well. I don't deny that. So John is here. He knows, he's in the heavy soils program. He knows about trying to rise P on heavier soils and availability, right, and release. So yeah, heavier soils are tougher. But yes, what you're basically saying is, if we apply the lime, we can release P from the soil, and P is massive, especially in the spring. It's massive in terms of the growth of grass in the spring and clover, and particularly important for the survival of both plants, ryegrass and clover. P, that is. So the lime is doing you a favour here. It's an unlocker.
So the reason we've you asked to join us today, John Leahy, is because you are John Maher's poster boy for spreading lime. And even though it's 10, 11 years ago, obviously you're still kind of involved in a little bit in the heavy soils program, kind of to a lesser degree than you were in the past. But when you got involved in the farm at home, your pH was actually very low. Now, obviously, we'd better tell people where you're farming. Obviously, in Athea, County Limerick, which is quite heavy soils. It is a very heavy farm. I've been on the farm with you in the past, and it is a heavy farm, especially across the road. So just give us your experience of the lime, John. I suppose like John said there, we don't have enough lime spread, and there's a lot of myths, I suppose, associated with lime. So when you came back farming, like, people probably thought you were mad spreading the amount of lime that you went spreading on the farm.
Yeah, look, I had to, I suppose my pH, Stuart was parcel farmer down 4.8. They were quite low, and I suppose I found that the return I was getting in fertiliser, I was having to spread 27, 28 units, every round to get get my sward of grass, and that was with a lower stocking rate. So I kind of tackled my P was also very low across the farm, so I had two challenges really. But I suppose I tried to tackle the pH first. Just that was the easiest and the cheapest one to tackle really. As the P was going to take much longer to bring it up. It was quite low, like, and it was like what David Wall said on the bucket. You have to keep filling the bucket until it starts overflowing. Which, like, pH was the lowest one to be able to tackle first. So look, that's where I started, and it was the cheapest one as well.
Yeah, but you would have spread a lot of lime dodge on initially. Like, I mean, I was looking at soil samples there for you last night, like, and geez, you've only 4 of the 30 samples, albeit no doubt you've probably more recent ones to hand yourself, but only 4 of the 30 were below 6.2, which is phenomenal for the area that you're farming in, really, because like pH, as I said, people would perceive that the high pH is a risky thing nearly for you to have.
Yeah, I thought that initially myself, but I suppose I was fairly aggressive in what I had to spread. I think 400 to 500 tons had to be sprayed in the milking block, we'll say, from the very start, So, look, during reseeds and that, I would have gone quite strong with lime, and I didn't see any effects. To be honest with you, I think I saw more benefits in that the grass was able to tiller and thicken and recover better, we'll say, after heavy rainfall and especially after maybe a bit of poaching. Your roots are able to tiller out, and you get you have more of a firmer bed, like. On some of that ground now, after it was back in 2013, we reseeded a field that had been down at 4.8 in pH. Now it really struggled the first year. I applied bag lime, I think, the first year after. We couldn't travel with a large spreader, but the reseed was really struggling, like, to survive, we'll say, because it was so low, But we got a dry year then, and I was able to travel with the big line spreader, and we covered it 2 tons to the acre. This was black ground, and the reseed really took off from then. Like, though you think a reseed would take off anyway the first year, but it was about a year afterwards before it got going, until I got lime on it. Like, it just shows you how important it is to get it in with reseed, especially in a low pH soil.
Yeah, and I suppose John Maher this time, the pH scale is a funny scale in that, like, the John Leahy's point there about the 4.8 versus the 6.2, that's an exceptionally acidic soil, so it stands to reason that John's seeds would have struggled in that kind of an environment.
Yeah, it is a funny scale. It requires serious horsepower when you get down to that level, Stuart, to shift pH. And look, let's be clear here, it's much easier to shift pH in a lighter soil than a heavier soil. But and then we throw the rainfall on top of it. Like, John is in a high rainfall area, while people, in our part of the country struggled from drought during the summer. I can tell you, Stuart, from about mid-July on, John would have had difficulties with rainfall, to put it mildly. So just the way the year came. But so the rainfall is a significant factor in this, and the Western Seaboard is always going to need more lime than the Eastern Seaboard in general because of rainfall. Rainfall is the biggest harvester of lime. Yes, some lime is burnt, for want of a better way of describing it, in milk production or meat production and silage production, but the biggest effect is rainfall. The soil type is a massive issue. It takes more lime to shift a heavier soil than a light soil. Often the soil results, depending on where you're getting them done, will have 2 pHs. They'll have a water pH and a buffering capacity pH, and it's always a water one you go by. But the recommendations are adjusted for the soil type, and heavier clay soils need more lime than a lighter soil, and that's why often the recommendations can be a little bit different for the same pH. Just to explain that to people. But I suppose, Stuart, like the standard numbers, if we were to allow for rainfall, allow for milk, allow for cull cow, allow for silage, allow for, nitrogen fertiliser having its negative effect on pH in the soils, all those things, the standard numbers are fairly simple. You're going to lose about, I suppose, over a 5-year period, you're going to, drop down by about a ton per hectare per year. So after 5 years, that's 5 ton per hectare. In simple farmers' language, then that's 2 ton of lime applied for the standard farm in the country, dairy farm that is, every 5 years. So you look, like, let's be clear here, 23, 24, they've been poor years for grass growth, poor years from weather perspective, damaged land, not the hectic in terms of milk prices either at times. So this year just allows greater opportunity with the good weather we have now, bit more money in the bank, and like the national stats are not great. Our allowances for nitrogen P are certainly more restricted. Lime unlocks both of those. People don't realize, like, to grow 13, 14 tons of grass, like, you need well over 400 kilograms of nitrogen. If 200 of that come from fertiliser, then the rest has to come from the soil. If the soil is wrong in pH, that nitrogen will not be released, So people don't realize it. So the standard number for a soil, because pH is right, is about, 60, 70 kilos of N per hectare, or in simple terms, 50, 55 units of nitrogen per acre released from the soil every year, because you have your pH right. And that's an important source of nitrogen now that we cannot forget, especially in the years ahead that are coming in terms of fertilizer restrictions. Yeah.
Okay, so back to you, John Leahy, then, on the practicalities of it. Obviously, as John has outlined there, you started to run into a bit of bother maybe in August with wet weather coming in from the Atlantic on the west coast. How do you get around that, and the fact that the farm is heavy as a whole, in terms of trying to keep your lime status right throughout from year to year effectively? How often do you soil sample, and then when do you target to go with the lime?
Well, look, the farm is soil sampled every year, so I can keep a good watch over, paddocks that are dropping in pH. It is probably, actually, one thing I've noticed since I've moved to more urea products is traditionally I would have been using can type, 18612s up to maybe 2018, 2019. But I started using more protected urea or urea products, and I've found that the pH, once I got the pH right, it didn't seem to stir with the can type fertilizers, but the urea type fertilizers, it seems to be dropping. So you have to kind of keep a closer eye in it. But like, the best of what I do is, once I get my samples early in the year, just kind of have, make a list of the paddocks that need to be topped up in lime, and if they've been taken out for bales or closed up for short-term silage or something like this, or reseed, you can, once you get enough for a 20-ton load, usually around 10 acres, you can, have it in the yard, and once the paddock is cut or you're reseeding, you can do 10 acres or 20 acres, whatever needs be,
Okay, and since you've started doing that, and it's a good point in relation to urea, because urea would be more acidic base, so it makes sense. You're backing up the science there with what you said. But since you've gone to the annual sampling, what kind of tonnage do you find you have to apply every year to keep things right?
Kind of 20 to 40 ton, like on the milking block. That's generally what I'd be spreading, so like the milking block is 40 hectares. But like I would be doing some silage ground as well, but yeah, that's kind of what I need to spread every year, between up to around 50 ton, unless new ground comes in that hasn't been ever limed or at all, like, or needs a full reseed.
Yeah, so it's basically part of your fertilizer budget, really, that you're going to be spreading that lime every year when you're thinking about what costs are ahead of you in each year, like.
Yeah. Generally, you're going to have, you'll always have 10 or 20 acres. 20% of the farm will be kind of need some bit of lime. So, like, if you have an outblock, we'll say, where you keep heifers, that might be suitable, there might be a block there, and you can tie it in then with some of the milking block. So it's very hard, I find, with the higher stocking rate, and because you're taking out less silage on the milking block, it's quite harder to get lime out in the milking block now as it was before at lower stocking rates, because you could close up a lot more before, But it's just to make a list, I think, early in the year, and be able to move in it. Obviously, this time of the year now is ideal. Like as you're closing up paddocks, you can lime away, and it'll actually help your grass for the following spring, because you will get that release of nitrogen. That's the biggest thing I found the first year that I really hit the lime hard. Like, it was my growth in the fall of the year and over the winter seemed to be way higher than normal.
And just, I suppose, given that you are on a heavy farm, then John will say, you obviously know from maybe late January, early February where to target. Do you make sure to get it done as early as possible, or like you said, now is given the opportunity, but it mightn't be an opportunity for you always, like?
No, you just have to take the opportunity, if there's a dry spell. And I think if you have that plan early in the year, you'll always be in the back of your mind, oh, Jesus, I'm taking out that paddock for silage next week. Just have a load of lime waiting in the yard. If it's there waiting, you've no excuse. Like, and if you can contact whoever's spreading it, like, he'll tell you when he's going to be there. But look, it's a no-brainer to have the pH right. It's probably one of the cheaper things, and it's no huge labour cost on the farmer, because all you're doing is making a phone call, and all you have to do is show him the paddock. Like the everything else is done for you.
And then, just out of interest, John, then just from the regular sampling, because your P status was another concern, as John Maher said there. Like, has that improved over the last number of years? Now, the type of soil that you have, it's very hard to lift the P in it. Even, like, I think there was a figure mentioned before of if you were spreading 80 units of P a year, you'd find it difficult to lift the P status in your farm.
Yeah, look, I suppose the whole fertility kind of journey with the farm, it has taken the bones of 10 years. There was an awful lot of the farm that was down in Index 1. No, there's still very heavy soils that do get very waterlogged, and they're probably more of a just maintain. They will be always in low index, but just try and maintain them, just through the year, like with feeding with. You're not going to build them up on it because of the nature of the soil, but we'll say on the rest of the farm, there's probably 30% of it that it would be quite wet, like. But then on the other parts of the farm, like, it has taken a number of years, but there's a lot of the farm now, and the better part of the farm is Index 3 and 4, like. But I think it would have taken even longer if I didn't have the pH right in the first place, and I could be wasting a lot of money and maybe overspreading early in the early years and seeing no results at all, like, because it did take a number of years.
So I suppose that just emphasises, like John, you used to often talk about it before, when people had greater allowances of the 2 bags of 18-6-12, and they still do in the early part of the springtime there. But I used to always say to people that your 2 bags of 18-6-12 was 4 bags of 18-6-12 if your pH was wrong. And John is making that point there very validly as well. Like, so fertiliser, as you said, I think you might have actually made a slip in what you said there. The bag of fertiliser is 25-30 euro, but the ton of lime is the same price, and people would be far better off spreading that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, if you just talk about the spend, just when you go back to John's figures, I remember once upon a time, John, if that's all right to say it to you, we used to spread about 120 tons of lime nearly on the farm back years ago. Right, and nearly about a ton to the acre on average, if that's all right, Stuart. But it didn't even account for 10% of the fertiliser spend for the year. So that's the point. Like, it's, well, you might think it's big tons and everything. Actually, when you get down to the brass tacks of it, it's actually small money for a massive return. I suppose the other point I want to illustrate, Stuart, I give general stats, so I'm going to say 2 ton every 5 years. For a farm like John's, that's heavier, or where you're in a high rainfall area, which is generally going to be the western seaboard, I'd say it's more like every 2 ton, more like every 3 or 4 years, not 5, right? But I'm just giving you general figures. John's alluded to that too in terms of the soil type and the rainfall. So, like, to use that famous expression, the more often I spread lime, the luckier I'll get. So, I think that's just to make that point that it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, but needs to be tracked. We have an opportunity now. Why not take it?
We've often seen very dry, frosty Decembers that present opportunities for spreading lime as well. And this is something that people really need to think of, that before the end of 2025, they need to get whatever lime is required on the farm out.
Yeah, just to make one comment, Stuart, the Grass10 newsletter is there. The lads here in Moore Park talked to Maher, and the predictions are there. Like the highest amount of rainfall is an inch, Stuart. Many parts of the country are going to get half an inch. Ground conditions, it's like they're phenomenal at the moment. If it's anyway reasonable, the ground can take it and we can still get this lime spread. Now, I haven't got the forecast into follow into next week. Ground conditions are unusually very, very good. So the opportunities there for people on dry land, I wouldn't have any great concern about that. For people on heavier land, they're going to have to be opportunistic. However, I suppose, Stuart, how will I finish this? Like when I go back to our colleague, I'm going to make reference to him. John will understand where I'm going with this. Ger Courtney worked with you and me for many years, Stuart. He was a great champion of all this stuff. But he did a survey, which John will be aware of, once upon a time, looking at the barriers to, applying lime. And November, December, to me, applying lime for many farmers is what I call a hope strategy. And Ger identified this as whether being a significant factor. Like you're hoping the ground will be able to travel upon, you hope the contractor will come, you hope it won't rain, and you hope the lime will be in the yard. There's just too much hope in that. Last November, December, yes. The previous November, December, oh Lord God, won't even go there. So to me, the opportunity presents itself a bit better at this time of year in terms of timing, in terms of ground conditions, in terms of opportunity. So, can we keep this in mind? It doesn't take much effort to get this right, as John has outlined. It doesn't take much financial resources to get this right, but the return is very, very high.
Okay, last word to you, John Leahy, because I'm looking at the clock here and I know you have to go. So just if somebody has a bunch of soil tests that are saying they have to spread big tonnages of lime, what's your advice to them? Go hit it hard straight away? Because we'll say myself and John can tell people all day and all night, but you've the practical experience of going in heavy with lime.
Historically, I would have done it as a reseed when I had very low pH. I was able to get kind of, you get up to 4 ton out per acre as you're reseeding, but that would be tilled in, so it would be between 4 inches of soil, but that kind of worked very quick, and they would still need a top up, even to bring them up to 6.2. But yeah, look, if you're very low, especially at this time of the year, if you close up paddocks, you could have 20-30 acres you could lime straight away once they're closed. If the conditions are right, most of those lime spreaders are fairly good to travel. So yeah, I definitely would hit it hard. You'll see the benefit next spring, certainly.
Pretty much an instant return on investment. So, and 7-1, John, you're saying as well.
Yeah, just my standard number, Stuart. Yep.
Thanks for coming on, John, and John Leahy in particular, for joining us there, kind of short notice, to give us your perspective of it. And as we said to people on heavier soils, you haven't been afraid to go in with heavy tonnages of lime there. As you've said, at 4 ton at reseeding would be well above what we would be recommending from time to time. So you went about it to get it you set yourself a goal of getting the pH up, and you've definitely done that, and it has paid dividends to you in the intervening period. And as you said, it's probably saved you a lot of money in terms of P&K fertiliser that you could have been throwing out for the crack effectively and not getting any return from it without getting the pH right. So thanks, John, for joining us. We'll let you go, and thanks, John, for coming on. And hopefully, the second time I'm saying it now, we'll get people going again before the end of the year, John Maher.
No harm with repetition, Stuart.
No, if you throw enough at the blanket, it'll eventually stick, John, is it?
That's the plan.
Right. Thanks, lads.
All right, thanks, Stuart.
That's all for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to John Maher and John Leahy for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. You can also email us on our dedicated email address dairyedge.podcast@teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join us next time for your Dairy Edge.